A delivery girl saw two men attacking someone in an alley. Her hand moved before her brain did. She threw her ball and saved his life. What she didn't know, the bleeding stranger was a mafia boss. And now his enemies were hunting her too. The smell hit Lena first, rotting fish and diesel fuel, thick enough to taste. She hated this route through Old Harbor, but it shaved 10 minutes off her delivery time, and 10 minutes meant one more order before midnight. One more order meant $20. $20 meant her brother Jake could eat something other than ramen for breakfast. She adjusted the straps of her worn delivery bag and pushed her scooter harder through the maze of abandoned warehouses. The engine sputtered. She really needed to get that fixed, but it kept going. Just like her. "Please don't die on me tonight," she whispered to the scooter. 3 more deliveries. That's all I'm asking. The sound of voices made her slow down. Angry voices, coming from the alley between 2 concrete buildings that looked like they'd been forgotten by the city decades ago. Lena's first instinct was to speed up and mind her business. In this neighborhood, curiosity could get you killed. But then she heard the wet, sickening sound of something hitting flesh. A groan. More voices, cold and methodical. "Should have stayed retired, Marco. The old ways are dead." "Your loyalty died first, Vincent." Lena stopped her scooter, her heart hammering. She should go. She should absolutely go right now. But her hand was already killing the engine, her feet already touching the cracked pavement. She crept toward the alley entrance, staying in the shadows. 3 men. 2 standing, 1 on his knees. The man kneeling was maybe 50, silver hair slicked back despite the blood running down his temple. His expensive suit was torn and stained dark. Even beaten and bleeding, he held himself like someone who'd never bowed to anyone in his life. His eyes, cold and sharp, stayed locked on his attackers. "Tony's already claiming the north side," one attacker said, pulling out a knife. He was younger, maybe 30, with a scar running down his neck. "Sal's taking the docks. We're splitting your empire before you're even cold, old man. And everyone will think you died in a gang war," the other one added, grinning. How tragic. The kneeling man, Marco, they called him, actually laughed. It was a rough, pained sound, but genuine. "You think you can run my organization? Vincent, you can barely run a protection racket. And you, Dominic, your muscle who got lucky. You'll be dead in a week." "We'll see about that," Vincent said, raising the knife. Lena's hand moved before her brain caught up. She'd been carrying the ball for hours, a heavy rubber handball, the kind used in professional courts. She'd found it in a donation bin that morning and couldn't resist grabbing it. Old habits. Her arm snapped forward. The ball flew through the air with a sharp whistle and caught Vincent square in the jaw with a crack that echoed off the warehouse walls. Vincent's head whipped to the side. He stumbled, the knife clattering from his hand. "What the?" All 3 men turned toward her. Lena's stomach dropped. What had she just done? "Well," Marco said, blood dripping from his mouth into a smile. "This is unexpected." Dominic was already moving toward her, reaching for his gun. Lena's hand dove into her delivery bag, fingers closing around the first thing she found, a can of energy drink from a canceled order. She threw it hard, aiming low. It hit Dominic's kneecap with a solid thunk. He swore and stumbled. Vincent was recovering, murder in his eyes, reaching for his own weapon. Lena grabbed the only other projectile she had, a rolled-up bundle of delivery receipts held together with a rubber band. She whipped it at his face. It wasn't heavy enough to hurt, but it made him flinch, made him close his eyes for just 1 second. Marco used that second. Despite his injuries, he lunged forward and grabbed the fallen knife, slashing at Vincent's arm. Vincent screamed and fell back. "Girl."
Marcos shouted.
"If you're going to commit to this stupidity, commit fully." Lena ran forward, her mind screaming that this was insane, but her body operating on pure adrenaline. She grabbed Marco's arm and hauled him toward her scooter. He was heavy, solid muscle under that expensive suit, but she'd been hauling delivery bags up 5-story walk-ups for 2 years. She was stronger than she looked. "You just signed your death warrant," Dominic snarled, raising his gun. Marco shoved Lena behind him. The gun fired. The bullet pinged off a metal dumpster inches from Marco's head. Lena screamed. "Move!"
Marcos shouted.
They ran. Marco's breathing was labored, and he pressed one hand against his side where blood was seeping through his shirt. Lena pulled him onto her scooter. It sagged under their combined weight and kicked the engine to life.
It sputtered. Died.
No, come on. They're coming. Marco grabbed the handlebar. Try again. Vincent and Dominic were 30 feet away and closing fast. Vincent had picked up his gun. Lena kicked the starter again. The engine caught. She twisted the throttle and the scooter lurched forward so hard she almost fell off. Marco's arm wrapped around her waist, holding on as she wove between rusted shipping containers and piles of rotting pallets. A shot rang out. The scooter's side mirror exploded. "Take the next left," Marco shouted in her ear. "How do you know where we're going?" "I used to own half this district. Left now." Lena yanked the handlebars. The scooter skidded around the corner, fishtailing wildly. Behind them, she could hear running footsteps, more shouting, and the worst sound of all, a car engine roaring to life. "They're going to chase us." "Then drive faster. This thing tops out at 35 miles per hour. Then be creative." Lena saw a narrow gap between two warehouses, barely wide enough for her scooter. She aimed for it. Marco saw where she was going and tightened his grip. "You're insane. You're welcome." They shot through the gap, with inches to spare on either side. Behind them, the car's brakes squealed as it skidded to a stop, too wide to follow. The driver laid on the horn in frustration. Lena didn't slow down. She wound through back alleys she knew from 100 delivery runs, taking turns that would lose anyone who didn't know these streets like she did. Her heart was trying to break through her ribs. Her hands shook on the handlebars. She'd just saved a mafia boss. She'd just made enemies of people who killed for a living. She'd just ruined her entire life in under 5 minutes. "Where are we going?" Marco asked.
His voice was weaker now.
Lena realized she had no idea. She couldn't go home. They'd seen her face, seen her scooter. They'd find her address in hours. She couldn't go to the police. Marco was clearly a criminal, and she'd just helped him escape. And she couldn't just dump him on the street because...
Because why?
Why couldn't she? She looked at him in the scooter's cracked side mirror. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. He was going to pass out soon. "Hold on," she said quietly. "I know a place."
"Thank you," Marco said.
Then he slumped against her back, and Lena drove faster into the night, carrying a dying mafia boss toward the only sanctuary she had left, her own home. She really hoped Jake was asleep. The stairs to Lena's attic apartment had never seemed so steep. Marco was conscious but barely, his weight pressing against her shoulder as she half-dragged him up 3 flights of narrow, creaking steps. Every few seconds, she stopped to listen for footsteps below, for voices, for anything that suggested Vincent and Dominic had found them. Only silence.
For now.
"This is where you live," Marco mumbled, looking at the peeling wallpaper and exposed pipes. "Not all of us have mansions," Lena hissed, fishing her keys from her pocket with her free hand. "And you're currently bleeding on my floor, so maybe save the judgment." She got the door open and maneuvered him inside, kicking it shut behind them. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it, tiny kitchen to the left, Jake's bedroom door closed straight ahead, and her own room, up the ladder to the attic space above. Barely 400 square feet total, but it was home. "Can you climb?" she whispered. Marco looked at the ladder, then at her. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." It took 5 agonizing minutes to get him up into the attic. Lena kept glancing at Jake's door, praying her 17-year-old brother wouldn't wake up and come out to investigate the noise. How would she even explain this? "Hey, Jake, I saved a mafia boss tonight, no big deal, go back to sleep." Finally, Marco collapsed onto her mattress on the floor, the only furniture in the cramped attic space besides a plastic dresser and a lamp. Lena climbed up behind him and immediately pulled the ladder up, sealing them in. "Take off your jacket," she ordered, already moving to the dresser where she kept Jake's old sports supplies. Marco struggled out of his blood-soaked jacket. Underneath, his white dress shirt was torn and stained dark red. 3 stab wounds, maybe 4. It was hard to tell in the dim light from her lamp. "You need a hospital," Lena said, her hands shaking as she pulled out the first aid kit she'd assembled over the years. Jake played basketball and baseball, and they couldn't afford emergency room visits for every sprain and cut. She'd learned to handle basic injuries herself. But this wasn't basic. "No hospitals," Marco said firmly. "They'll find me there. Vincent has people everywhere." "Then you might die in my bedroom." "I've survived worse." He locked eyes with her. "Who are you, girl?" "Lena." Lena chinned. She soaked a clean cloth in rubbing alcohol. "This is going to hurt." "Everything already hurts." She pressed the cloth to the worst wound on his side. Marco's jaw clenched, but he didn't make a sound. Lena had seen tough guys at the clinic cry over scraped knees. This man had been stabbed multiple times and barely flinched. "You're not a nurse," Marco observed, watching her work. "Delivery driver. But my brother's an athlete. Gets hurt a lot." She wrapped gauze around his torso, pulling it tight. "I'm good at improvising." Clearly, he gestured vaguely at himself. "The ball you threw. That wasn't luck. You knew exactly where it would hit." Lena didn't answer. She focused on cleaning the cut on his temple, avoiding his piercing gaze. "You trained," Marco continued. "That kind of precision doesn't come from throwing newspapers." "I used to play handball," she said finally. "Long time ago." "Used to." "Parents died. Someone had to pay rent." She finished bandaging his head and sat back.
"There.
"You're not going to die in the next hour, at least." Marco studied her attic room, the water-stained ceiling, the single small window covered with a sheet, the stack of delivery receipts on the floor serving as a makeshift nightstand. No pictures, no decorations. Nothing that suggested a girl in her early 20s lived here. "You gave up handball to deliver food," he said quietly. "I gave up handball to keep my brother in school and keep a roof over our heads." Lena started packing up the first aid supplies. "Not everyone gets to chase dreams."
"No."
"They don't." Something flickered across Marco's face. "Respect, maybe. Or recognition." "How old are you?" 23.
"Why?"
"You're too young to die for a stranger." Lena laughed bitterly. "Funny. I was just thinking the same thing about you." A sound from below made them both freeze. Jake's bedroom door opening. Footsteps in the kitchen. The refrigerator opening. Lena put a finger to her lips and moved to the attic floor hatch, peering down through the crack. Jake stood in the kitchen in his basketball shorts, drinking milk straight from a carton. His dark hair stuck up in every direction. He looked so young, so normal, so safe. "What have I done?" Jake finished drinking, put the milk back, and shuffled back to his room. His door clicked shut. Lena released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding.
"Your brother," Marco said.
"My brother," Lena confirmed, turning back to him. "Who cannot know you're here. Who cannot get involved in whatever nightmare I just walked into." "Then you should have left me in that alley." "Yeah, well, I didn't." She wrapped her arms around herself. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a cold, creeping fear. "Those men, Vincent and Dominic, they saw my face. They saw my scooter. How long before they find me?" Marco was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was grave. "Hours. Maybe less. Vincent's smart. He'll check traffic cameras, ask around the neighborhood. He knows you came from somewhere nearby. So I should run. Take Jake and disappear. They'll find you. And when they do, they'll kill you both to tie up loose ends." Marco shifted, wincing at the pain. "Your only chance is to help me reach my consigliere, Enzo. He's the only person I trust who can protect you." "Your consigliere," Lena laughed shakily. "I don't even know what that means." "It means he's my most trusted advisor." "My friend." Marco's eyes were hard. "It means if we reach him before dawn, You and your brother might live through this. Lena looked at the attic window, where the darkness outside was just beginning to fade to gray. Dawn was maybe 3 hours away. Where is he? That, Marco said, is the complicated part. Lena woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. For a confused moment, she thought it was a delivery alert. Then she remembered everything: the alley, the blood, the mafia boss currently passed out on her mattress. She grabbed her phone.
6:47 Uhr morgens.
Multiple news notifications covered her screen. Breaking: Mafia boss Marco Santori dead in gang clash. Santori Empire in chaos after leader's death. Violet Knight in Old Harbor leaves crime boss dead. Her blood went cold. She clicked the first article. Marco Santori, 52, alleged head of the Santori crime family, was killed last night in what authorities believe was an internal power struggle. His body was reportedly found in the Old Harbor district. 2 of his top lieutenants, Vincent Russo and Dominic Caruso, have assumed temporary leadership and are calling for peace among the organization's members. They didn't waste any time. Marco's voice made her jump. He was awake, propped against the wall, looking at her phone screen. His face was still pale, but his eyes were alert. Let me guess, they're calling themselves heroes, restoring order after my violent reign. They're saying you're dead, Lena whispered. They're telling everyone you're already gone. Which means they're moving fast to consolidate power. Marco tried to sit up straighter and winced. Did the article mention Enzo? Lena scrolled through.
No.
Just Vincent and Dominic.
Good.
That means Enzo's still alive and smart enough to stay hidden. Marco held out his hand. Give me your phone.
What? No.
This is my only. They can track phones. If Vincent has any of my tech people working for him, they're already searching for anyone who made calls near that alley last night. He wiggled his fingers impatiently. Unless you want them triangulating your location, give it here. Lena reluctantly handed it over. Marco pulled out the battery and SIM card, then handed the pieces back to her. You can put it together later, somewhere far from here.
Great.
So now I'm phoneless and harboring a dead man. Lena rubbed her face. This just keeps getting better. Below them, she heard Jake's alarm go off. Then his door opening, the bathroom fan starting. He'd be awake soon, wondering where she was, why she wasn't making breakfast. You need to act normal, Marco said, reading her expression. Your brother goes to school. You pretend it's a regular day. The more routine everything looks, the safer you both are. Except it's not a regular day, and 2 murderers are looking for me. Which is why we leave at 9, right after your brother's gone. Marco leaned his head back against the wall. Enzo will be at the rail yard on the east side. He always said if things went bad, that's where we'd meet. It's neutral ground, abandoned for years, no cameras, no witnesses. And you trust him? Completely? With my life. I've known Enzo for 30 years. He pulled me out of the gutter when I was 19 and stupid. He's the only family I have left. Marco's voice softened. He'll protect you. I give you my word. The word of a mafia boss means a lot, does it? It means everything in my world. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something other than cold calculation there. Sincerity, maybe. Or desperation. I won't let them hurt you or your brother. Not after what you did. A knock on the attic hatch made them both freeze. Lena? You up there? Jake's voice, muffled but close. Lena's heart stopped. She looked at Marco, who had already grabbed the bloody jacket and shoved it under the mattress. He lay down flat and pulled her spare blanket over himself, becoming just a lumpy shadow in the dim attic light. She opened the hatch slightly.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm here. Jake's face appeared below, concerned. You okay? You didn't come down for breakfast. Just tired. Long night of deliveries. She forced a smile. You heading to school? In like 20 minutes. Coach wants us there early for practice. He studied her face. You look weird. You sick? Just didn't sleep great. I'm fine, really. She needed him to leave. Needed him gone before he noticed something wrong. You eat yet? Made toast. There's some left if you want it. Thanks, Jake. Hey. She caught his arm as he started to turn away. I might not be here when you get home. Got some errands to run. But I'll see you tonight, okay? He frowned. Errands? You never take time off. Well, maybe I should start. She ruffled his hair the way she used to when he was little.
Go.
Don't be late. Jake hesitated, clearly wanting to ask more questions, but finally nodded and headed back down the ladder. Lena listened to him moving around the apartment, grabbing his backpack, his shoes, his keys. The front door opened and closed. She waited 5 full minutes, counting her heartbeats, before letting out a shaky breath. He's a good kid, Marco said from under the blanket. The best. Lena closed the hatch. Which is why we're going to make sure he never finds out about any of this. She moved to her tiny window and pulled back the sheet an inch, peering down at the street. Everything looked normal. A few people walking to work, a delivery truck double-parked, someone walking their dog. But then she saw it. A black sedan parked across the street, windows tinted dark. It hadn't been there last night. Marco, she said quietly. We might have a problem. He was up in an instant, moving to the window despite his injuries. He looked down at the car and cursed under his breath. Vincent's people. They're watching the building. How did they find us so fast? Your scooter. They probably tracked it through street cameras. Marco stepped back from the window. We can't use the front door. Is there another way out? Lena thought fast. Fire escape.
Goes down to the back alley.
But we have to go through Jake's room to reach it. Then that's what we do. We wait until that car shifts position. They'll have to rotate surveillance or refuel eventually. The moment they move, we run. Marco looked at her. Can you get us to the rail yard without using main roads? I've been delivering in this city for 2 years. I know every back route and shortcut. She grabbed her delivery bag and started shoving supplies into it. Water bottles, the first aid kit, her dead phone. But if they're watching this building, they'll be watching the rail yard too.
Probably, Marco admitted.
But Enzo's smart. If he knows I'm alive, he'll be ready. And if he doesn't know you're alive, Marco's jaw tightened. Then we're walking into a trap, and we both die before lunch. Lena stared at him. You know, most people try to be more reassuring. Most people lie. Marco met her eyes. I respect you too much for that. Despite everything, Lena almost smiled. Then she looked back at the black sedan and felt the fear return, cold and sharp. They were trapped in her apartment, surrounded by killers, and their only hope was reaching a man who might not even know they were coming. This was going to be a very long day. The black sedan left at 8:43 a.m. Lena watched through the window as it pulled away, replaced 20 minutes later by a different car. Dark blue this time, but the same tinted windows, the same predatory stillness. They're rotating surveillance, Marco confirmed. We have maybe 3 minutes while they're switching shifts and comparing notes. 3 minutes to get down the fire escape and disappear into the city. 3 minutes or we die here. Marco was already moving toward Jake's bedroom window. Let's go. They climbed through Jake's window onto the rusted fire escape. Lena's hands shook on the cold metal. Below, the back alley was empty except for overflowing dumpsters and a stray cat. She led the way down, moving as quickly and quietly as possible while Marco followed, his breathing labored. His wounds were slowing him down. She could see fresh blood seeping through the bandages under his shirt. They reached the alley, and Lena guided him toward a maintenance passage she used for deliveries, a narrow space between buildings that opened onto a side street 3 blocks away. By the time they emerged, both were breathing hard. My scooter's back at the apartment, Lena said. We're on foot. Better that way. Harder to track. Marco scanned the street. How far to the rail yard? 20 minutes walking. Less if we hurry. They hurried. Lena led them through a maze of back streets and cut-throughs, avoiding main roads and security cameras. Marco kept pace despite his injuries, moving with the careful efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime staying alive in dangerous situations. The old rail yard appeared ahead, A sprawling graveyard of rusted train cars and collapsed loading platforms, surrounded by a chain-link fence with more holes than metal. They slipped through a gap in the fence and entered the maze of abandoned machinery. Enzo should be in the old dispatcher's office, Marco said, pointing to a small brick building near the center of the yard. He always said the high ground was important. They picked their way through weeds and broken glass. Everything was silent except for the wind whistling through empty train cars.
Too silent.
Lena's instinct screamed warning. Marco, I don't like this. Two men stepped out from behind a rusted cargo container ahead. Young, lean, wearing dark clothes. Their hands rested casually on their belts, where Lena could see the outlines of guns. Well, the taller one said. Boss said you'd show up here eventually. Marco stopped walking. I don't recognize you. New recruits. Promoted yesterday after you died, the shorter man grinned. Vincent's cleaning house. Anyone loyal to you is out. Anyone smart is in. And you think you're smart. Smart enough to know a dead man when we see one, the tall one pulled his gun. Vincent wants proof you're really gone this time. Said we could have a bonus if we bring him the girl too. Lena's hand slipped into her delivery bag. Her fingers found what she was looking for. The metal bearings she carried for weight when her bag was too light. She'd collected them from the repair shop downstairs, useful for balancing loads. Now they might save her life. You don't have to do this, Marco said calmly. Vincent will be dead within a week. Dominic will kill him, or the Rossi family will, or someone else. Traitors always eat each other. Big talk from a guy who's bleeding all over his fancy shirt. The short one raised his gun too. Any last words? Lena's arm snapped forward. The metal bearing caught the tall gunman in the forehead with a sharp crack. He stumbled backward, gun firing wild, the bullet pinging off a train car 20 feet away. She threw two more bearings in rapid succession. One hit the shorter man's gun hand. He yelped and dropped his weapon. The other caught him in the throat. He went down choking. Marco was already moving. He grabbed the tall man's dropped gun and fired once. The man fell. The short one was scrambling for his weapon, still gasping for air. Marco kicked the gun away and pressed his own weapon to the man's head. Tell me where Enzo is. The man spat blood. Go to hell. Wrong answer. Marco pressed the gun harder. I don't have time for loyalty to traitors.
Where is
Enzo? Vincent's watching him. He knows you're alive, knows you'll try to make contact. He's got people on every one of your meeting spots. The man's eyes were wide with fear. You're already dead, Santori. You just don't know it yet. Marco's jaw tightened. Then he brought the gun down hard on the man's temple. The scout crumpled, unconscious. We need to move, Marco said, already heading back toward the fence. If Enzo's being watched, this whole place could be compromised. Lena followed, her heart racing. If they're watching all your meeting spots, how do we reach him? We don't. Not directly. Marco climbed through the fence gap, wincing. We need to go to one of my old safe houses. I keep emergency supplies, clean phones, money. We regroup and find another way. And where's this safe house? West Pier. Abandoned warehouse district. Lena's stomach dropped. That's on the other side of the city. Through downtown. You got a better idea? She didn't. But as they hurried away from the rail yard, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of options and time. Behind them, the unconscious scout's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen lit up with a single name, Vincent. They reached West Pier just after noon. The warehouse Marco led her to looked like every other abandoned building in the district. Broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, a condemned sign barely hanging on. Marco approached the side door and felt along the frame until he found a hidden key. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. The smell hit them first. Smoke. Recent smoke.
No, Marco, breathe.
They stepped inside. The warehouse was gutted. Black scorch marks covered the walls. The furniture was reduced to charred skeletons. In the center of the floor, burned into the concrete, was a symbol, a crown with a slash through it. It's a message, Marco said quietly. Vincent's saying the old king is dead. Lena walked further in, her shoes crunching on ash and broken glass. Your supplies?
Gone.
Everything's gone. Marco moved to what had once been a back room. More destruction. He kicked at the debris, then stopped. His hand reached down and pulled out a small metal box, blackened but intact. He opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with a phone number written in careful handwriting.
Enzo, Marco said.
He was here. He left a sign. How do you know it's from him? Because this is his emergency code. He got out before they torched the place. Marco pocketed the paper. But if they burned the safe house, they've probably burned all of them. We're running out of places to hide. A sound from outside made them both freeze. Footsteps. Multiple people. Back door, Marco hissed.
Now.
They ran through the burned warehouse as voices echoed from the front entrance. Lena burst through the back door first, Marco right behind her, and they disappeared into the maze of pier buildings just as shouts erupted behind them. They'd been found again. And this time Lena realized they'd been led here. Vincent wasn't just hunting them. He was hurting them. They didn't stop running until they were 6 blocks from the pier, hidden in the loading dock of an abandoned furniture store. Marco collapsed against a concrete pillar, his hand pressed to his side. Fresh blood seeped between his fingers. You're bleeding again, Lena said, already pulling out what remained of her first aid supplies.
Ai fine.
You're not fine. You're dying in slow motion. She lifted his shirt. The bandages were soaked through. We need to change these, or you'll get infected. Infection takes days. Vincent will kill me in hours, but Marco didn't stop her as she unwrapped the old bandages and pressed clean gauze against the wounds. That symbol in the warehouse, the crown with the slash, Vincent's putting it everywhere. He's telling every family in the city that my empire is up for grabs. How long have you been running this organization? Lena asked, wrapping fresh bandages around his torso. 23 years. Since I was your age, Marco's eyes were distant. I inherited it from the man who killed my father. Spent a decade earning respect, another decade keeping it. Built something that was supposed to last. And Vincent was with you the whole time? 15 years. I promoted him myself. Thought he was loyal. Marco laughed bitterly. Enzo warned me. Said Vincent was too ambitious, too hungry. I didn't listen. Lena finished bandaging and sat back. The number Enzo left, can we call it? Not yet. If Vincent has tech people on his side, they'll be monitoring for any calls to Enzo's network. The moment we make contact, they'll trace it. Marco pulled out the scorched paper and studied it. But there's something else here. See these numbers? Lena looked closer. Below the phone number were what looked like random digits. 8-15-23-4. A code.
Times.
8 a.m., 3 p.m., 11 p.m. for a.m. Enzo's telling me when it's safe to call, when he'll be in a clean location, away from surveillance. Marco checked a clock on the wall through the broken window. It's 12:47 now. Next safe window is 3 p.m. That's 2 hours from now. 2 hours to stay alive and hidden. Marco pocketed the paper. Do you know anywhere in the city where Vincent wouldn't think to look? Lena thought about it. Her apartment was compromised. The rail yard was compromised. Marco's safe houses were burned. They needed somewhere unexpected, somewhere that had nothing to do with either of them. Then she remembered. My old handball stadium, she said slowly. It's been abandoned for 3 years, scheduled for demolition but never actually torn down. Nobody goes there anymore. Would anyone connect it to you? Maybe. I trained there for years, but that was before my parents died. Different life. She met his eyes. It's the best option we have. Marco considered, then nodded. How far? 30 minutes on foot. We'll need to be careful. It's in a busy neighborhood. Then we go now, while the lunch crowds are out. Easier to blend in. They left the loading dock and merged into the street traffic. Lena kept her head down, hyper-aware of every face, every car, every security camera. Marco walked beside her, somehow managing to look casual despite the pain she knew he was feeling. He pulled his jacket close to hide the bloodstains, but anyone looking closely would see something was wrong. They passed an electronics store with TVs in the window. Every screen showed the same news broadcast. Santori Organization in Transition. A reporter stood outside a downtown building. Behind her, men in suits filed in and out, Vincent among them, looking somber and official. Vincent Russo and Dominic Caruso have assured city officials that the transition of power will be peaceful, the reporter said. They claim Santori's death was the result of an internal dispute with a rival faction and that they're working to stabilize. Keep walking, Marco muttered, but Lena had already seen his expression. Rage, barely controlled. They're rewriting history, she said. They're erasing me, probably telling everyone I was losing control, making bad decisions, putting the organization at risk. Marco's voice was tight. By the time they're done, people will think they did everyone a favor. They turned down a side street. Ahead, Lena could see the old handball stadium rising above the surrounding buildings, a concrete structure with broken windows and faded signage. Home of the city champions, the sign read, though half the letters had fallen off.
There, she said.
They approached from the back, where a gap in the fence had been cut by vagrants or kids looking for a place to hang out. Lena led Marco through the gap and into the stadium's dark interior. It was exactly as she remembered, the court covered in dust and debris, the bleachers tagged with graffiti, the scoreboard hanging at an angle. But the memories that flooded back were vivid. The sound of balls hitting walls, her coach shouting encouragement, the smell of floor polish and sweat, the feeling of throwing a perfect shot and hearing it crack against the target. She'd been good, really good. Scouts had come to watch her play. She'd had scholarship offers. Then her parents died, and everything changed. You trained here, Marco said, looking around. Every day for 5 years, Lena climbed the bleachers to a spot with a view of all the entrances. I was going to go pro. Had my whole future mapped out. What happened? Life happened. My dad had a heart attack while driving. Hit a truck. Mom was in the passenger seat. Lena's voice was flat, emotionless. She'd told this story so many times it felt like talking about strangers. Jake was 14. Someone had to take care of him. So you gave up handball. I gave up everything. She turned to look at Marco. That's what you do for family. Marco was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard before. My father was a baker. Did I mention that? He made the best cannoli in Little Italy. Vincent's people would love that detail. The big crime boss came from a baker's family. What happened to him? A man named Sal Moretti decided our neighborhood was his territory. My father refused to pay protection money. Moretti made an example of him. Marco's hands clenched. I was 17. Enzo found me trying to buy a gun from some dealer who would have robbed me blind. He took me in, taught me how things really worked, how to survive in this world. And you became exactly what you hated.
No.
I became what was necessary, Marco met her eyes. But I never forgot where I came from. Every person who worked for me got fair pay, protection for their families, respect. I ran my organization like a business, not a gang. That's why Vincent's coup will fail. He doesn't understand that loyalty isn't bought with fear. A sound from outside cut their conversation short. A low mechanical hum. Lena moved to the broken window and peered out. Her blood turned to ice. A drone. Small, black, with a camera mounted on the bottom. It was circling the stadium slowly, methodically scanning. Marco, she whispered. They found us. He was beside her in an instant looking at the drone. His jaw tightened. That's military-grade surveillance. Vincent's throwing everything at this. How did they know we'd be here? They didn't. They're searching everywhere. Marco watched the drone make another pass. But now they know. We have maybe 10 minutes before they send people. We can't keep running. You're too injured, and they're everywhere. I know. Marco pulled out the paper with Enzo's number. We're out of options. I have to call now, even if it's not the safe time. They'll trace it. They'll trace us anyway when their people arrive. He looked at her. Find me a phone. Anything that works. We're making our last stand here. Lena found an old payphone 2 blocks from the stadium, one of the last relics in a city that had moved on to cell towers and wireless everything. It sat outside a shuttered convenience store, covered in stickers and corrosion, but miraculously still functional. Marco fed quarters into the slot and dialed Enzo's number. The phone rang once,
Twice.
3 times. "Come on," Marco muttered. "Pick up, Enzo." On the 5th ring, someone answered. "Who is this?" "It's me." Silence. Then, "Marco? Madonna, they said you were dead. I saw the news."
I'm alive.
Barely. Marco's eyes scanned the street constantly. "Vincent and Dominic ambushed me at Old Harbor. They're staging a coup." "I know. Half the organization thinks you're gone. The other half is too scared to speak up." Enzo's voice was tight with stress. "Where are you?" "Doesn't matter. They're tracking everything. I need you to." A car turned onto the street. Black sedan, tinted windows. The same kind that had been watching Lena's apartment. "We have to go," Lena hissed, grabbing Marco's arm. "Enzo, listen carefully," Marco said rapidly. "There's a girl with me. Lena Chun. She saved my life, and now Vincent's hunting her. I need you to protect her and her brother. Jake Chun, 17, goes to Lincoln High. Get him somewhere safe. Do it now." "Marco, where are you?" Marco hung up and they ran. Behind them, the sedan's doors opened. 2 men emerged, moving fast. One spoke into a radio. Lena and Marco ducked into an alley, then through a parking garage, then out onto another street. They were back in Lena's neighborhood now. She recognized the corner store where she bought Jake's breakfast, the laundromat where they did their weekly wash. Everything looked normal. People going about their day, unaware that 2 people were running for their lives. "My apartment's 3 blocks away," Lena panted. "Jake will be home from school in an hour. We need to get to him first. They'll have people watching your building." "I don't care. He's my brother." They approached Lena's street carefully, staying in the shadows of buildings. The blue sedan from this morning was still there, parked in the same spot. But now there was a second car, a gray SUV, parked on the opposite corner. 2 surveillance teams, Marco said. "They're covering all exits. There's a back way through the Chinese restaurant next door. I know the owners. They let me cut through sometimes." Lena started toward the alley behind her building, then stopped dead. 2 men stood outside the restaurant's back door. One was smoking a cigarette. Both were watching the street with predatory focus. "They've sealed off every approach," Marco said quietly. "Vincent's being thorough." Lena's phone, still in pieces in her pocket, suddenly felt heavy. She couldn't call Jake, couldn't warn him. He'd walk right into this trap thinking it was just another normal day. "We need a distraction," she said. "Something to pull them away from the building." "Like what?" Lena looked around, thinking fast. Across the street was a construction site, scaffolding and equipment everywhere. Next to it, a fire hydrant. An idea formed. "Can you hotwire a car?" she asked. "What kind of question is that? Can you or can't you?" "Yes, but..." "Then stay here." Lena was already moving, crossing the street with her head down. She reached the construction site and grabbed a heavy wrench from an unattended toolbox. Then she moved to the fire hydrant. The wrench hit the hydrant cap with a sharp clang. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th hit, something inside cracked and water began spraying into the air. Not a huge geyser like in movies, but enough to flood the street and send water cascading toward the parked cars. People started shouting. The men watching Lena's building looked toward the commotion. One of them spoke into his radio, pointing at the flooding. Marco understood immediately. As the surveillance teams were distracted, he moved to the gray SUV and worked on the door. 30 seconds later, he had it open. Another 30 seconds, and the engine roared to life. He drove it straight at the blue sedan, horn blaring. The sedan's driver barely had time to react before Marco's stolen SUV clipped its front bumper. Not hard enough to cause real damage, but enough to spin it sideways and block traffic.
More shouting.
More chaos. In the confusion, Lena sprinted to her building and through the front door. She took the stairs 3 at a time, her heart hammering. Please let Jake be okay. Please let him still be at school, still be safe. She burst into the apartment. Empty. Jake, she called out. Jake, are you here? No answer. She checked his room. Backpack was gone, bed unmade. He was still at school. Safe.
For now.
Lena grabbed what she could. Jake's birth certificate from the drawer where she kept important papers, the emergency cash she'd been saving in a coffee can, a photo of their parents. Everything that mattered fit in her delivery bag. She was heading for the door when she saw it, an envelope taped to the hallway mirror. Her name written on it in unfamiliar handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. We know where your brother goes to school. We know his schedule. We know he has basketball practice today until 5 p.m. in the West Gym. Be smart, Lena. Give us Santori and Jake stays safe. Keep running, and we'll make you watch him die.
Ve.
The letter fell from her fingers. 5 p.m. She checked the wall clock. 4:17 p.m. 43 minutes. She ran back down the stairs so fast she almost fell. Marco had abandoned the SUV and was waiting in the alley behind the building, out of sight of the surveillance teams. They know about Jake, Lena gasped, shoving the letter at him. They're going to take him from school. We have 40 minutes. Marco read the letter, his expression darkening. Lincoln High.
Yes.
West Gym. It's 15 minutes from here in traffic, maybe 10 if we run. They'll be waiting for us. This is a trap. I don't care. Lena's voice broke. He's 17 years old. He has nothing to do with any of this. I have to. I know. Marco grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. I know. And we'll get him. But if we run in blind, they'll kill all 3 of us. We need a plan. We don't have time for a plan. Then we make time. 30 seconds. Marco's mind was already working. The school, how many exits?
3.
Main entrance, gym entrance, and emergency exit by the science wing. They'll cover the gym entrance where Jake will be, probably the main entrance too. The emergency exit? Alarmed. If we use it, everyone will know. Good. We use that to our advantage. Marco was already moving, pulling her toward the street. We're going to need a car, something fast, and... His words cut off as they emerged from the alley. Vincent stood 20 feet away, flanked by 4 armed men. He smiled, cold and triumphant.
Hello, Marco.
Miss Chun. Vincent's hand rested casually on his gun. Going somewhere? Behind them, Dominic appeared, blocking the alley exit. More armed men with him. They were surrounded. And Jake's school was 13 minutes away. You know what I admire most about you, Marco? Vincent said, stepping closer. Your stubbornness. Most men would have accepted death in that alley. But not you. You just keep surviving. Marco's hand moved toward his jacket.
For guns immediately pointed at him.
I wouldn't, Vincent warned. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and bleeding out. Just make this easy. When have I ever made anything easy for you?
Marco replied.
Lena's mind raced. 6 men, all armed. She had nothing but the wrench still tucked in her bag. Even if she threw it perfectly, took one down, they'd still be dead before they made it 5 feet. But Jake. 40 minutes until practice ended. 40 minutes until Vincent's people took him. Let the girl go, Marco said. She's not part of this. She became part of this when she saved you. Vincent's eyes shifted to Lena. You should have kept driving that night, sweetheart. Now your brother's going to pay for your heroism. Touch him and I'll kill you myself, Lena said, surprised by the venom in her own voice. Vincent laughed. With what? Rubber balls? Dominic told me about your little trick at the rail yard. Impressive, but parlor tricks don't stop bullets. Behind Vincent, Lena noticed something. The fire hydrant she'd broken was still spraying water, and it had reached the construction site. The ground was slick, tools scattered and floating in the growing puddle. An idea formed. Insane but possible. Marco, she said quietly. When I move, you go left. What? Lena's hand shot into her bag and grabbed the wrench. But instead of throwing it at Vincent, she hurled it at the construction scaffolding. The wrench hit a support beam with a clang, and the unstable structure, already compromised by the flooding, began to sway. What the hell? One of Vincent's men started. The scaffolding collapsed with a screech of metal, sending planks and pipes crashing down. Vincent's men scattered, instinctively diving away from the falling debris. In the chaos, Lena grabbed Marco's arm and ran. They bolted down the flooded street, water splashing around their feet. Behind them, shouts and gunfire. A bullet pinged off a car hood inches from Lena's head. There. Marco pointed at a delivery truck idling outside a restaurant, driver inside picking up an order. They ran to it. Marco yanked the driver's door open, pulling the startled driver out. Sorry, friend. Emergency. Lena jumped into the passenger seat. Marco gunned the engine, and they peeled away just as Vincent's men reached the street, still firing. The truck's back window shattered. Lincoln High. Lena shouted. We have 35 minutes. Marco drove like he'd done this 1,000 times before, probably had, weaving through traffic, running red lights, cutting through parking lots. Behind them, two of Vincent's cars appeared, pursuing. They're on us, Lena said, watching the side mirror. I see them. Marco took a hard right, then immediately left, trying to lose them in the residential streets. How far to the school? 8 minutes at this speed. But Marco, we can't lead them straight to Jake. We won't. We'll lose them first, then double back. He cut through an alley so narrow the truck's mirrors scraped both walls. The handball stadium, is it near the school? Lena thought quickly. 6 blocks east.
Why?
Because that's where we're going first. We need weapons, leverage, something. Marco's eyes met hers. And you know that building better than anyone. It's our only advantage. They emerged from the alley onto a main road. The pursuit cars were nowhere in sight, temporarily lost in the maze of streets. Marco immediately changed direction, heading toward the stadium. They ditched the delivery truck 3 blocks away and approached on foot. The stadium looked different in the late afternoon light, more desolate, more forgotten. But Lena moved through it like it was yesterday, leading Marco to the equipment storage room she'd used as a teenager. The door was rusted shut. Marco kicked it once, twice. It gave way. Inside were the remnants of her old life, dusty handballs, training equipment, protective gear. And in the back, something unexpected, a storage locker that had belonged to her coach. Lena pried it open. Inside were flares, a first aid kit, and, surprisingly, an old revolver with a box of ammunition. Coach Frank was paranoid about break-ins, she explained, handing the gun to Marco. Never thought I'd be grateful for it. Marco checked the weapon, loaded it. 6 shots. Not much, but better than nothing. Listen to me carefully, he said. We can't fight Vincent head-on, but we can draw him here, away from your brother. Create a diversion. How? I call him. Tell him I'm here, ready to surrender. He'll come. He wants to finish this personally. Marco's expression was grim. When his people arrive, you use the chaos to slip away and get to Jake. Get him somewhere safe. And leave you here alone. I've been alone before. I'll manage. You can barely stand. They'll kill you. Probably. Marco met her eyes. But your brother will live. That's what matters. Lena stared at him. This man she'd known for less than 24 hours, this criminal who'd lived a life so different from hers, was offering to die so Jake could survive. No, she said firmly. We don't split up. We're smarter than them. We've proven that twice already. We stick together, we get Jake, and we all survive. Lena. I didn't save you just so you could throw your life away. She grabbed a handball from the pile, felt its familiar weight in her hand. This is my home court. If Vincent wants to come here, let him. I know every angle, every echo, every shadow in this building. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. You're either very brave or very stupid. Both, probably. She grabbed more balls, stuffing them into her bag. Make the call. Tell Vincent you're here. Then we show him what a mistake that is. Outside, a car engine rumbled. Then another. They were already being surrounded. Too late for the call, Marco said, moving to the window. 4 cars. At least 12 men, all armed, spreading out to cover every exit. And at the center of them, walking toward the stadium's main entrance with absolute confidence, was Vincent. He tracked us, Lena whispered. No, Marco's voice was bitter. I led him here. The phone call to Enzo. They traced it, followed us from the payphone. Then we're trapped. Yes, Marco chambered a round in the revolver. But so is he. Vincent's voice echoed through the empty stadium. Marco, I know you're in there. Let's finish this like men, shall we? Face to face. Just like the old days. Lena looked at Marco. He looked at her. Together, she asked. Together, he agreed. They moved deeper into the stadium, into the shadows of the court where Lena had once dreamed of championships. Now she was fighting for something far more important. Jake's practice would end in 22 minutes. They had to end this before then. Split up and search every room. Vincent's voice carried through the stadium. But don't kill them yet. I want to have a conversation with my old boss first. Lena and Marco pressed themselves against the wall of the equipment storage corridor, hidden in the shadows. Through the doorway, they could see flashlight beams sweeping across the court. 12 men, Marco whispered. 6 shots in the gun. We need to even the odds. The stadium has 3 levels, Lena said quietly. Old maintenance catwalks up top, court level, and basement locker rooms. If we can get them to spread out. We pick them off one by one, Marco nodded. Show me the catwalks. They moved silently through the darkness, Lena leading them through corridors she'd navigated 1,000 times. Every creak of the old building made her heart jump. Every distant voice reminded her that Jake was running out of time. 19 minutes until practice ended. They reached a rusted ladder that led to the upper maintenance level. Marco tested it. It held. They climbed, moving slowly to keep the metal from groaning. At the top, a narrow catwalk stretched across the ceiling of the main court, 40 feet above the ground. Below, Vincent's men were spreading out. 4 on the court, checking behind bleachers and equipment. 4 more heading toward the basement. Vincent himself stood at center court with the remaining men, looking around like he owned the place. He's making himself bait, Marco observed. Wants me to try something stupid. Then let's be smart. Lena pulled out a handball and pointed to the far corner of the court, where old championship banners hung from the ceiling. See that air vent? If I can hit it just right, it'll make noise. Draw some of them away. She lined up her shot, judging distance and angle like she'd done 10,000 times before. The ball left her hand in a perfect arc, sailed through the darkness, and struck the vent with a sharp clang that echoed through the stadium. All heads turned toward the sound. There, one of Vincent's men shouted, pointing at the corner. 2nd level. 3 men broke away from the group, heading for the stairs. Vincent stayed put, smiling slightly. He knew it was a trick, but he was letting it happen anyway.
Testing them. We need to move, Marco said.
They'll check the catwalks next. They hurried along the narrow walkway, trying to stay quiet. But the old metal groaned under their weight. Below, someone heard it. Up there, flashlight beams swung upward. Lena saw the light searching and pulled Marco down just as bullets started hitting the catwalk around them. Metal sparked. The handrail exploded in fragments. Go, go. Marco shoved her forward. They ran along the catwalk as bullets chased them. The walkway ended at a small platform with an access door to the roof. Lena hit the door with her shoulder. It was locked. Marco. He fired once at the lock. It shattered. They burst through onto the roof just as Vincent's men reached the ladder behind them. The roof was a maze of ventilation units, old air conditioners, and crumbling concrete. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows. Lena could see the city spreading out around them, and 6 blocks away, Lincoln High School. 16 minutes. They're coming up, Marco said, positioning himself by the door. We can't let them spread out up here. Too much ground to cover. Then we keep moving. Force them to chase us. Lena pointed at the adjacent building, an old factory, connected to the stadium by a narrow gap.
There.
If we jump, we can lose them. That's a 15-foot gap. 12, actually. I measured it once when I was training. She'd thought about jumping it back then, testing herself. Never had the courage. Now she had no choice. More men were coming through the roof door. At least 5, maybe 6. Marco fired twice, forcing them back, but they'd be through in seconds. Jump.
Marcos shouted.
Lena ran and leaped. For a terrifying moment she was airborne, the alley 40 feet below, nothing but air beneath her feet. Then she hit the factory roof and rolled, gasping. Marco was right behind her. He jumped, his injured body barely making the distance. Lena caught his arm and pulled him up as bullets chipped the concrete around them. They ran across the factory roof. Behind them, Vincent's men were making the jump. 2 made it easily, a third hesitated, and a fourth decided to find another route down. The fire escape. Lena spotted it on the far side. They sprinted for it, climbed over the edge, and descended the metal stairs as fast as they dared. Their footsteps rang out like bells. They reached street level and immediately ducked into an alley. Marco was breathing hard, his hand pressed to his side. When he pulled it away, his palm was red. "You're bleeding worse." I know his face was gray. "How much time?" Lena checked a clock through a shop window. 14 minutes. They had to get to the school.
Now.
But as they emerged from the alley onto the street, 3 of Vincent's men appeared from a side entrance. They'd circled around to cut them off. "There," one shouted. Lena and Marco ran in the opposite direction, back toward the residential areas. They cut through yards, jumped fences, ducked through garages. The pursuit was relentless. Every time they thought they'd lost them, another car appeared, or men on foot cut off their path. Vincent had deployed his entire network. This wasn't just about killing Marco anymore. This was about proving that no one could escape him. They found themselves in a narrow alley behind a row of townhouses. Dead end. A tall fence blocked the way forward, and footsteps were approaching from behind. "Up," Marco gasped, pointing at a fire escape ladder. They climbed. Marco moved slower now, his strength fading. Lena practically dragged him up the last few rungs onto a rooftop. From here, she could see Lincoln High, 5 blocks away. So close. 10 minutes. "We're not going to make it," Marco said quietly. He slumped against a ventilation unit, the gun loose in his hand. "I can't run anymore." "Yes, you can. You have to." "Lena," he looked at her with something like regret.
"I'm dying."
"Maybe not today, maybe not from these wounds. But Vincent won't stop. As long as I'm alive, you and your brother are targets." "Don't say that. It's true. The only way you both survive is if—" "No," Lena grabbed his jacket. "We're not splitting up. We're not giving up. My brother is 5 blocks away, and we're going to get him."
"How?"
"I can barely stand." "Then I'll carry you if I have to." She pulled him to his feet. "When I was 13, my coach told me the difference between good players and champions is that champions never quit, even when they're losing, even when it seems impossible. This isn't a game."
"No."
"It's more important than any game I ever played." She met his eyes. "So get up. Be a champion." Marco stared at her. Then, impossibly, he laughed, a short, pained sound. "You're insane." Completely, she helped steady him. "Can you walk?" "I can try." Below them, voices called out. Vincent's men were searching the alleys, getting closer. Time was running out in every possible way. But Lena spotted something, a maintenance shaft that led into the building below. Old, narrow, probably full of rats and darkness. But it would get them off the roof unseen. "There," she pointed. "We go down through the building, come out a block over. Then we run straight to the school, no stops, no detours." "And if Vincent's men are already there?" "Then we fight." She pulled another handball from her bag. "I still have ammunition." They descended into the dark shaft. It was cramped and filthy, but it worked. They emerged in an abandoned apartment, moved through the empty rooms, and exited onto a different street. Lincoln High was 3 blocks ahead now. Lena could see students starting to leave the building. Practice was ending early. 8 minutes on the clock had somehow become now. There. Lena spotted Jake coming out of the gym entrance, basketball bag over his shoulder, talking to a teammate. She also spotted the black sedan parked across the street. 2 men inside, watching the school entrance. Jake was walking straight toward them. And he had no idea. Jake! Lena screamed across the street, no longer caring about stealth. Her brother turned, confused. The 2 men in the sedan immediately looked toward her voice, then at Jake, then back at her. One reached for his door handle. Marco raised the revolver and fired into the air. The shot echoed across the street, sending students and pedestrians scattering. The men in the sedan froze, uncertain. Run! Lena shouted at Jake. Run now! Jake's confusion turned to fear. He dropped his basketball bag and bolted. The men in the sedan were out now, moving toward him. Lena sprinted across the street, Marco struggling to keep pace beside her. She reached Jake first, grabbing his arm. Come with me. Don't ask questions. Just run. Lena, what's happening? Who are those? Run. They ran. The 2 men were close behind, shouting into radios.
More cars would be coming.
Lena pulled Jake through a park adjacent to the school, Marco covering their rear with the gun. What did you do? Jake gasped as they ran. Why are people chasing us? I'll explain later. Right now, just... A car screeched around the corner ahead, blocking their path. Vincent stepped out, gun drawn. Enough running, he said calmly. Marco, you're done. And Lena, you're out of tricks. Marco raised his revolver. Let them go, Vincent. Or what? You'll shoot me? Vincent gestured at his men surrounding them. You have maybe 4 bullets left. I have 12 men. Do the math. Jake pressed close to Lena, terrified. She could feel him shaking. Her little brother, who was supposed to be worried about basketball games and homework, now standing in the middle of a gang war. This was her fault. All of it. Take me, Marco said. Let them walk away. You win. You get the organization, the territory, everything. Just let them go. Vincent considered this. You know, Marco, that's almost noble. Almost, he shook his head. But they've seen too much. They know what really happened. Can't have witnesses. Then we all die right here, Marco said flatly. Because I promise you, Vincent, I'll make sure my last bullet has your name on it. The standoff held. Guns pointed in every direction. Lena's mind raced for a solution, any solution. But they were out of options, out of time, out of luck. Then a phone rang. One of Vincent's men answered it, listened, then his face went pale. Boss, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Enzo. He's at the North Side warehouse with 20 men. They're armed, and they're asking for you by name. Vincent's expression flickered, the first crack in his confidence. That's impossible. We've been tracking Enzo for days. He's alone in hiding. Not anymore, the man held up his phone, showing a photo. Lena could see it from where she stood. Enzo, older man with gray hair, standing in front of a group of hard-looking men in suits. He's calling out the coup, saying anyone loyal to Santori should come to him. He's splitting the organization. Vincent's jaw clenched. He's bluffing. 3 of our guys just switched sides. Tony and Sal are sending people to meet with him. Boss, if we don't respond now, we lose everything. The math was changing. Vincent could kill Marco and witnesses, but if Enzo was rallying loyalists, the coup would fail anyway. He needed to stop Enzo before the organization fractured completely. Vincent stared at Marco with pure hatred. You planned this. I planned nothing. But Enzo's smart. He knows how to play the long game. Marco smiled through his pain. Did you really think you could take over in a day? My people aren't all cowards like you. Vincent's gun hand trembled with rage. For a moment, Lena thought he'd shoot anyway, consequences be damned. Then his phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face darkened further. Understood, he hung up and looked at his men. Everyone to the north side.
Now.
What about them? Dominic asked, nodding at Marco. Leave them. They're not going anywhere. Santori can barely stand. Vincent stepped back toward his car. Let him bleed out in the street. When we're done with Enzo, we'll come back and clean up the mess. The men hesitated, then followed Vincent's orders. Within seconds, all the cars were pulling away, racing toward the north side to deal with Enzo's challenge. And just like that, they were alone. Jake was shaking, tears streaming down his face. Lena, what is happening? Before she could answer, an old sedan pulled up, nothing fancy, just a civilian car. The passenger window rolled down, and Enzo looked out. Get in, he said calmly. Quickly, before Vincent realizes it was a trick. Marco actually laughed. You magnificent bastard. The warehouse. Empty. I spread rumors, made some calls, had my nephew send that photo with some guys from a security firm. Enzo smiled. Vincent's rushing to fight an army that doesn't exist. But by the time he realizes it, we'll be long gone. They piled into the car, Lena helping Marco into the back seat, Jake climbing in beside her, still confused and terrified. Enzo drove away at a normal speed, nothing that would attract attention. You must be Lena, Enzo said, looking at her in the rearview mirror. Marco told me you saved his life. I threw a ball at a guy. You threw a ball at Vincent Russo and lived. That's more than most people can say. Enzo glanced at Jake. And you're the brother. Don't worry, kid. You're safe now. Safe. Jake's voice cracked. Lena, who are these people? Jake, Lena didn't know where to start. She saved my life, Marco said quietly. And I put yours in danger because of it.
I'm sorry.
Jake looked between them, trying to understand. Then he looked at Marco's blood-soaked shirt, at the exhaustion on Lena's face, at the gun still in Marco's hand. Are you in the Mafia? He asked Marco directly. Yes. And they're trying to kill you? Yes. And now they're trying to kill us too. Not anymore, Enzo interjected. Vincent will realize the trick soon, but by then we'll have regrouped. Marco's not dead, which changes everything. The organization will split, some will stay with Vincent, but many will come back to Marco. Civil war, essentially. Messy, but survivable. That doesn't sound safe, Jake said. It's not, Enzo admitted. Which is why you two are leaving the city tonight. What? Lena said. We can't just leave. We have school, work, our apartment. All of which Vincent knows about. Marco shifted in his seat, wincing. Enzo's right. You need to disappear until this is over. How long will that take? Marco and Enzo exchanged a look. Weeks, Enzo said. Maybe months. Lena felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. Everything she'd built in the last 5 years gone. The apartment, her delivery job, Jake's school and basketball team. All of it erased because she'd thrown a ball to save a stranger. Where would we even go? She asked quietly. I have a place, Enzo said. Small town upstate. Safe house under a clean name. You stay there, keep your heads down, and when the dust settles, you come home. Jake was crying now, quiet tears running down his face. Lena put her arm around him. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. You saved someone's life, Jake said, voice choked. That's not something to apologize for. Enzo drove them to an abandoned auto yard on the outskirts of the city, where a handful of cars were already parked in the shadows. Men in suits stood in small clusters, talking in low voices, watching the road. What is this? Lena asked. The people who stayed loyal, Marco said. Enzo called them while Vincent was chasing us. Anyone who doesn't want to serve a traitor. They got out of the car. Lena counted maybe 15 men, all of them looking tense and armed. They turned when they saw Marco emerge, and something shifted in their expressions. Relief, maybe, or vindication. Boss, one of them said, stepping forward. We heard you were dead. Almost, Marco straightened despite his pain, trying to look stronger than he was. But I'm still here. And Vincent's coup ends today. Another man approached, younger, nervous. Half the organization thinks you're gone. Vincent's got the north side, the docks, most of the protection routes. We're outnumbered 3 to 1 inch. Numbers don't matter if the leadership is weak. Marco looked around at the assembled men. Vincent betrayed me because he thought he could do better. He thought violence and fear were enough. But you all know that's not how I ran things. We had rules.
Honor.
A code. Vincent doesn't care about codes, someone called out. He's already making moves on the Rossi family's territory. He's going to start a war. Then we remind him that wars have consequences. Marco pulled out a phone. One Enzo had given him. I'm calling a council meeting. Neutral ground. Everyone comes unarmed. We settle this like civilized people. If Vincent wants the organization, he can make his case in front of everyone. He'll never agree to that, Enzo said. He knows you'll expose him. He'll agree because if he doesn't, he looks like a coward. And if there's one thing Vincent can't stand, it's looking weak. Marco started dialing. Find us a location. Abandoned factory. Warehouse. Somewhere neutral that neither side controls. One of the men spoke up. There's the old textile factory on River Street. Been empty for years. No cameras, no nearby buildings. Used to use it for meetings back in the day. Perfect, Marco put the phone to his ear. Let's see if Vincent takes the bait. The textile factory was exactly as promised, a massive concrete shell filled with rusted machinery and broken windows. Afternoon light streamed through the holes in the roof, casting strange shadows across the empty floor. Lena and Jake stayed near the entrance with Enzo while Marco and his loyalists positioned themselves on one side of the main floor. They'd arrived early, checked for ambushes, set up sightlines. It felt like preparing for battle. You shouldn't be here, Enzo said to Lena. This is going to get ugly. Marco made me a promise, Lena replied. He said we'd all survive. I'm making sure he keeps it. Stubborn kid, but Enzo smiled slightly. I can see why Marco likes you. Jake stood close to his sister, still processing everything. This is insane. We should go to the police. And tell them what? Enzo asked. That the Mafia is having a dispute? Police don't get involved in our business, son. Not in this city. So what happens now? Now we see if Vincent is smart or stupid. Car engines rumbled outside. Multiple vehicles. Through the broken windows, Lena counted at least 6 cars pulling up. Doors opened and men emerged. 20, maybe 25 of them. Vincent walked in first, flanked by Dominic and a dozen armed men. He saw Marco standing in the center of the factory floor and smiled. Well, well. The dead man lives. Vincent spread his arms. You wanted a council meeting? Here I am. Let's talk. You tried to kill me, Marco said flatly. You stabbed me in an alley and left me to die. Then you told everyone I was dead and tried to steal my organization. What's there to talk about? Succession. Evolution. Progress. Vincent walked closer, his men matching his movements. You were getting soft, Marco. Making deals with the feds, talking about legitimate business. This organization was built on blood and power, and you forgot that. I built an empire that lasted 2 decades. How long do you think yours will last? Longer than yours did. Vincent gestured at the assembled men. Most of them are with me now. You've got what, 15 people? 20? I've got 3 times that. It's over, old man. Accept it with dignity. Marco looked around at Vincent's forces, then at his own small group. The math was clear. Even if every one of Marco's men was willing to die fighting, they'd lose. You're right, Marco said quietly. The numbers favor you. Vincent grinned. Finally, you're seeing sense. But there's something you forgot. Marco's voice grew harder. Loyalty isn't about numbers. It's about trust. And nobody trusts a traitor. Big words from a man who's about to die. Vincent pulled his gun. Again. Everything happened at once. Vincent's men raised their weapons. Marco's men did the same. The air filled with tension thick enough to choke on. And then Lena saw it. A glint of light from one of the second-floor windows. A rifle barrel. Vincent had positioned a sniper. Marco, down, she screamed. The sniper fired. Marco dove left. The bullet hit a support beam where his head had been a second earlier, sparking off the metal. The factory erupted in chaos. Gunfire exploded from both sides. Men scattered for cover behind machinery and concrete pillars. Lena grabbed Jake and pulled him behind a large air compressor as bullets whined through the air. Stay down, she shouted over the noise. But she couldn't just hide. Marco was out there, wounded and exposed. She saw him duck behind a conveyor belt, returning fire with his revolver. 2 shots left, maybe 3. Lena looked around frantically. The second floor, old catwalks and machinery. She could get up there, get a better angle. Her bag still had 4 handballs in it. Jake, stay here. Don't move. Lena, no. But she was already running, staying low, weaving between pillars as bullets chased her. She reached a metal staircase and climbed fast, her heart hammering. The second floor was a maze of old equipment and support beams. Perfect. She spotted the sniper across the factory, repositioning for another shot at Marco. She pulled out a handball, judged the distance, 70 feet, maybe 80. Difficult but possible. The ball left her hand in a perfect arc. It flew across the factory and hit the sniper square in the side of the head. He jerked, his rifle clattering against the railing, his next shot going wide and hitting the ceiling. Below, Marco saw the sniper reeling and understood. He rolled out of cover and fired at 3 of Vincent's men, pinning down his loyalists. 2 went down. Click. Empty. Lena threw another ball, this time at a man aiming at Enzo. The ball ricocheted off a pipe and hit the man's gun hand. He dropped his weapon with a curse. What the hell? Dominic shouted, looking around for the source of the projectiles. Who's throwing? Lena hit him next. The ball caught him in the jaw, spinning him around. His gun fired wild as he fell. Vincent's men were confused now, shooting at shadows, not understanding what was happening. Marco's loyalists used the distraction to advance, taking better positions, evening the odds. Lena moved along the catwalk, throwing with precision. She wasn't trying to kill, just disarm, disrupt, create openings. A ball to a gun hand here, a knee there, a ricochet off a wall to hit someone behind cover. She was in her element, moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 practice sessions. Every throw counted. Every angle mattered. Below, the tide was turning. Vincent's numerical advantage meant nothing when his men couldn't aim properly, when they were constantly being hit by projectiles from unexpected angles. Fall back, Vincent shouted, realizing he was losing. Everyone out. Now. His men retreated toward the exits, laying down covering fire. Vincent backed away, fury and disbelief on his face. He pointed at Marco. This isn't over. Yes, Marco said, standing despite his wounds. It is. Vincent ran. His men followed, piling into their cars and screeching away. The factory fell silent except for groaning and heavy breathing. Marco's men were battered but alive. 3 wounded, none dead. On Vincent's side, 6 men were down, either unconscious or too injured to leave. They'd be arrested soon enough, or turned by Marco's people. Marco looked up at the catwalk where Lena stood, ball still in her hand. Thank you, he called up. She nodded, suddenly exhausted, and climbed back down to where Jake waited, pale and shaking but alive. It was over. Or so she thought. The aftermath of the factory battle was chaos controlled by purpose. Marco's men secured the wounded, cleared the weapons, and made phone calls to others still deciding which side to choose. Word spread fast. Marco Santori was alive, Vincent Russo was in retreat, and the coup had failed. Lena sat on a concrete block with Jake, her arm around her brother's shoulders. He'd stopped shaking but hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. She didn't know what to tell him. How do you explain to a 17-year-old that his ordinary life had just been blown apart? Lena-chan, a voice said. She looked up. Enzo stood there, a tablet in his hand. You should see this. On the screen was a video feed from inside the factory during the fight, security footage from a camera she hadn't noticed. It showed everything. Her climbing to the second floor, throwing with impossible precision, hitting target after target, disrupting Vincent's attack, saving Marco's life for the third time. Where did that come from? Lena asked. One of our guys set up cameras before the meet, just in case. Standard precaution. Enzo smiled slightly. You're a hell of a shot, kid. I've never seen anything like it. It's just handball. It's a lot more than that. Enzo pocketed the tablet. Marco wants to talk to you. Both of you. They followed Enzo to where Marco sat on an old office chair someone had found. A medic, one of his people with actual training, was rebandaging his wounds properly. Marco looked exhausted but alive, more alert than he'd been in hours. Sit, he said to Lena and Jake. They sat on an overturned crate across from him. First, Marco said, looking at Jake, I owe you an apology. You did nothing wrong, and you were pulled into this nightmare because your sister has a good heart. That's my fault, and I'm sorry. Jake nodded slowly. Are we still in danger? Vincent's on the run, and his support is crumbling. Most of his men were opportunists. They joined him because they thought I was dead and he'd won. Now that I'm back, they're switching sides or disappearing. Marco winced as the medic pulled a bandage tight. But Vincent and Dominic are still out there, and they're dangerous when cornered. So yes, there's still risk. How long?
Days.
Maybe a week. Marco met his eyes. I promise you, I will end this. And when it's over, you and your sister will be safe. How can you promise that? You're one guy. I'm the guy who built this organization from nothing. I know every player, every territory, every debt owed and favor traded. Marco's voice was steel. Vincent thinks he can win because he's ruthless. But he forgot that I can be ruthless too when people I care about are threatened. Lena felt something shift in her chest at those words. People I care about. He meant them. What happens now? She asked. Now, we consolidate. I call every underboss, every lieutenant, every person with influence. I show them I'm alive. Show them the video of Vincent's ambush. Expose him as the traitor he is. Marco leaned back carefully. By midnight, Vincent will have maybe 5 people still loyal to him. By tomorrow, he'll have nowhere to hide. And then... Marco's expression hardened. And then I finish what he started in that alley. A commotion at the factory entrance made everyone turn. 2 of Marco's men entered, dragging someone between them. Dominic, bleeding from his shoulder, hands bound. They threw him down in front of Marco. Found him 3 blocks away, one of the men reported. His car broke down. He was trying to run. Dominic looked up at Marco, fear and defiance mixed on his face. Go ahead.
Kill me.
Vincent will still win. Vincent's already lost. Marco stood slowly, towering over Dominic. You know it, or you wouldn't be running. Where is he? Go to hell. Marco pulled out his phone and played a recording. Vincent's voice filled the factory. If we don't respond now, we lose everything. Then another clip, Vincent from earlier. Let him bleed out in the street. When we're done with Enzo, we'll come back and clean up the mess. I've got hours of Vincent's plans, his orders, his confession to trying to kill me. Marco crouched down to Dominic's level. Every family in this city will hear this by morning. Vincent will be marked for death by people far worse than me. His only chance of surviving the next month is if he runs so far that nobody ever finds him. Dominic's defiance crumbled. He's at the West Side Marina. Boat slip 47. He's trying to get a yacht fueled up to leave the coast. Thank you. Marco stood and nodded to his men. Tie him up somewhere secure. The police can have him tomorrow. As Dominic was dragged away, Enzo stepped forward. We should move on the marina now. End this tonight. Agreed. Marco looked at his assembled men. Everyone who can still fight, with me. Everyone else, secure this location and start making calls. I want every boss in the city to know I'm back before morning. The men moved with purpose, readying weapons and vehicles. This was it, the final move. What about us? Lena asked. Marco turned to her. You've done more than enough. Enzo will take you and Jake to the safe house. By morning, this will all be over. And you promise you'll survive? Jake asked suddenly. Because my sister saved you 3 times. It would suck if you died now. Despite everything, Marco smiled. I promise. I'm too stubborn to die. That's what I'm afraid of, Lena said quietly. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then, he did something unexpected. He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. Just a phone number, nothing else. When this is over, he said, call that number. There's someone I want you to meet. A handball coach I know, retired pro. She trains kids who want to go professional. He met Lena's eyes. You gave up your dream to save your brother. Maybe it's not too late to get it back. Lena stared at the card, her throat tight. Marco. You saved my life. Let me save your dream. He touched her shoulder briefly. Now go. Let me finish this. Enzo guided them toward his car. As they walked away, Lena looked back once. Marco stood surrounded by his men, giving orders, planning the final assault. A mafia boss commanding his empire. But for a moment, his eyes met hers, and she saw something beyond the criminal, beyond the violence. She saw someone who understood sacrifice. Someone who kept his promises. He'll be okay, Enzo said gently. Marco's survived worse. I know, Lena said. But as they drove away into the night, towards safety and whatever came next, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't really over. Not yet. 3 weeks later, Lena stood at the riverfront overlook, watching the water catch the sunset. The city sprawled behind her. The same city she'd lived in her whole life, but somehow different now. Quieter, at least for her. Jake was back at school. Enzo had arranged for them to return after Vincent and Dominic were dealt with. She didn't ask for details, and Enzo didn't offer any. All she knew was that Vincent had been found at the marina, and whatever happened that night ended the coup permanently. The news reported it as a gang dispute resolved internally. The city moved on. You came. She turned. Marco walked toward her, wearing a simple black coat over civilian clothes. He looked healthier, color back in his face, walking without pain. Almost like a normal person if you didn't look too closely at his eyes. You said to meet here at sunset, Lena said. I keep my promises. So do I. Marco stood beside her at the railing, looking out at the water. How's Jake? Back to worrying about basketball and failing chemistry tests. Normal teenage stuff, Lena smiled slightly. He thinks what happened was a fever dream. I'm not correcting him. Smart. The less he remembers, the better. Marco was quiet for a moment. And you? How are you holding up?
I'm okay.
Working delivery again. Same routes, same apartment, same life. She paused. Except I can't stop looking over my shoulder. That'll fade. Give it time. Will it? Lena looked at him. I saved your life, Marco. I threw a ball at a mafia lieutenant and changed everything. That's not something you just forget. No, Marco agreed. It's not. Which is why I wanted to meet one more time. To say thank you properly, and to say goodbye. Goodbye? I'm stepping back. Not completely. I still have responsibilities, people depending on me. But I'm letting others handle the day-to-day operations. Enzo's taking over most of it. Marco's expression was thoughtful. What happened with Vincent? It reminded me that this life has an expiration date. Everyone either dies or gets out. I'm choosing the latter while I still can. What will you do? I have legitimate businesses, real estate, investments, nothing illegal. I'll focus on those. Maybe travel. Maybe find out who Marco Santori is when he's not running a criminal organization. He smiled slightly. It's been a long time since I knew. Lena turned back to the river.
I'm glad.
You deserve a second chance. So, do you? Marco pulled out an envelope from his coat. Which brings me to this. What is it? Open it. Inside was a letter from the National Handball Association, addressed to Lena Chin. She scanned it quickly, her eyes widening. This is a training program invitation. For professional athletes. She looked up at Marco. How did you? I sent your old competition records to a friend who coaches. She watched videos of you playing when you were 18 before you quit, and she wants to meet you. No guarantees, but she thinks you could still go pro if you train hard. Marco, I can't afford. It's covered. Full scholarship, living expenses, everything. Anonymous donor, he met her eyes. You gave up your dream once. Don't give it up twice. Lena's hands shook holding the letter. This is too much. I can't accept. Yes, you can. Because you earned it, Marco's voice was firm. Not by saving me, though that helps. But by having the courage to act when it mattered, by protecting your brother no matter the cost, by being the kind of person who throws a ball at armed criminals because it's the right thing to do, he smiled. That's championship material, Lena. Don't waste it on delivery routes. Tears blurred her vision. She'd spent 5 years pushing down the part of her that still dreamed of handball courts and championships, of hearing the crack of a perfect shot and seeing it hit exactly where she aimed. She'd buried that girl under responsibility and practicality. But she was still there, still dreaming. What about Jake? She asked quietly. Enzo's setting up a trust fund. Jake's college tuition, living expenses until he graduates, all covered. Anonymous donor again. Marco's expression softened. You gave up everything for him. Let me give something back.
Why?
Lena's voice broke. Why do all this for me? Because you showed me something I'd forgotten. Marco looked out at the river. That courage isn't about how much power you have or how many people fear you. It's about doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. You reminded me that honor actually means something. They stood in silence as the sun dipped lower, painting the water gold and red. I'll never see you again, will I? Lena asked. Probably not. I'm going to disappear for a while. Become someone new, Marco held out his hand. But I'll be watching from wherever I end up. And when you win your first professional championship, because you will, I'll know it was partly because a girl with a rubber ball saved a dying man in an alley. Lena shook his hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. Thank you, Marco. For everything. Thank you, Lena. For my life. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening crowds. Lena watched until she couldn't see him anymore, then looked back at the letter in her hands. A second chance. A new beginning. She thought about her parents, about the dreams she'd abandoned, about Jake and the future he deserved. She thought about a girl on a scooter who decided to stop and help instead of driving away. And she smiled. 6 months later, Jake sat in the stands of a regional handball championship, watching his sister compete. She moved across the court like water, every throw perfect, every angle calculated. She was beautiful when she played, fierce and focused and completely alive. In his pocket was an anonymous letter that had arrived that morning. Just 3 words written in careful handwriting. Make her proud.
No signature.
No return address. But somehow, Jake knew exactly who'd sent it. On the court, Lena wound up for her final shot. The ball left her hand in a perfect arc, sailed across the court, and struck the target with a sharp crack that echoed through the stadium.
Score. Victory.
Championship. The crowd erupted. Jake jumped to his feet, screaming his sister's name. And somewhere far away, he liked to think, a former mafia boss smiled and raised a glass to the girl who'd saved his life. She was a champion now.
She always had been.
The end.